Baroque woodwind instruments were quite different from modern wind instruments. Many could only play in one key, as they did not have additional mechanical parts to play any chromatic notes. Most could only play 8, one for each of the fingers. If a woodwind instrument was to be played in a different key, an entirely new instrument was needed, one that was in the key that the piece required. Enter the Baroque Clarinet, an interesting instrument even in the Baroque period. It is one of few instruments that does not have a direct ancestor from an earlier time. The only instrument that the Baroque clarinet is related to, albeit distantly, is a shepherd's instrument, the chalumeau. Most, if not all, woodwind instruments of the Baroque period utilized the technique called overblowing. This forced the instrument's pitch up 8 tones. It was achieved by making the reed, or part of the instrument that vibrated, to oscillate twice as fast, either by thumbhole or by subtle changes in the musician's embouchure, blowing techniques, or both that would result in the pitch shifting up an octave. This was no problem for other Baroque period woodwind instruments with the octave jump, because when a woodwind instrument overblowed, the note that is next in the scale can be played. The chalumeau, when overblown, moves up by 12 tones, something called a duodecime register. This meant that the 8 tone holes that the instrument had could not play the full scale, as they would skip notes. This also caused the chalumeau to be very difficult to play in tune, requiring many subtle changes in embouchure to maintain the tuning across all the notes. It was also difficult to perform a register jump on the chalumeau at all. Later, around the 1730s in Nuremberg, Germany, C.H. Denner managed to create a functioning instrument that solved many of the chalumeau's problems, namely the tuning, the register jump, and the missing notes. He fixed the tuning by adding a more traditional mouthpiece structure to the new instrument. He fixed the missing notes by adding a key to the index finger at the top of the instrument. And he also fixed the register jump by adding a specific key for the thumb to make the transition between registers easier for players. The key, then called the duodecime key, is now more commonly referred to as the register key. Because of the additional keys, the instrument was very loosely related to the chalumeau. Realistically, only the registers were similar. Later renditions of the Baroque clarinet would add better functioning keys as well as an additional key for the index finger. This new instrument, called the clarinetto by Denner, was described to look like an oboe with a wider mouthpiece, and sounding like a trumpet from afar. A timelier comparison would be that it looked like a much larger version of a modern recorder. When the clarinet was created, it had a greater range than that of an oboe or trumpet. It also had a much easier time with complex parts or runs that pieces were requiring of instruments. The result was the clarinet's quick inclusion in orchestral works and other compositions. Composers like C.P.E. Bach and Handel were already writing pieces for it by 1740, where the latter demanded clarinets in D minor for his overture in 1748. Antonio Vivaldi also wrote a few works for the clarinet. The ones that were most focused on the clarinet were his works RV 559 and 560. These two are concertos for 2 clarinets and 2 oboes. RV 559 really shows what Vivaldi and other composers liked about the clarinet at the time. It was able to tackle slightly faster and more complex passages than the oboe. It is also able to tackle larger leaps in an easier fashion. The instrument soared in popularity, achieving 2 positions in the Mannheim Orchestra around 1760, just after the Baroque period. The popularity for the clarinet spread even more when Mozart released his masterful concertos for the instrument. Overall, the Baroque clarinet had an interesting history. Without too many ancestors to draw from, it had a very difficult time starting out. Eventually, after much revisions and fixing to certain aspects of the instrument, namely the keys, tone holes, mouthpiece, and overall shape of the instrument, including the addition of 2 extra sections, the barrel and the bell of the clarinet eventually turned into what we know it as today. A fast, unique-sounding instrument ready for any skilled player to pick it up and play any scale, run, or passage that's set.